One way of evaluating a company's capabilities and opportunities is to use what is called a strategy canvas. Let's say, for example, that there are 4 characteristics that drive the success of a company in your industry. One can draw a graph with these 4 generic characteristics: quality, schedule, cost, and features. On such a graph, your organization, your competitor, and the opportunity are outlined. Normally, your competitor has a higher perceived level of quality. On the other hand, you and your competitor have a similar schedule, cost, and features of your competing products. Where the opportunity seems to be is to develop a product that has high quality, can be delivered quickly, at a high price, but has relatively few features. For example, if you were a watchmaker, you might develop a new watch that is of high quality, can be delivered quickly to each customer, is perceived as expensive, and having substantial value, while still having a very simple, clean design. Organizations and communities must be cautious about thinking that it is easy to globalize themselves. One might look at examples like Tata Consulting in India, Cemex in Mexico, or Embraer in Brazil, and think that these companies continue to be successful and have few barriers to expansion. However, most companies, including some of these, suffer from vulnerabilities that may limit their growth. According to a recent Harvard Business Review article, emerging global companies often suffer from similar risks. Among these are a devotion to how they operate now, issues trying to expand from isolated domestic markets, a docile labor force, and homogeneous senior management. Because of these, aspiring global companies have good cash flow and wish to expand, they may come to believe that new markets are similar to their own. One example is a lubricants company who attempted to expand into China. The primary purpose of their product in the United States is to make bolts, fasteners, and screws easier to move. They attempted to sell their product on these merits and found out quite quickly that Chinese consumers are actually little interested in such a feature. It turns out that Chinese can use any type of oil or lubricant to satisfy this need. Only after conducting marketing studies did the lubricants company realize that the Chinese market is principally interested in a product that will protect against rust. Once it started advertising its product this way, sales took off. They were also initially hampered by their CEO's dependence on his own personal experience and salesmanship, and his lack of reliance on marketing studies. This tiptoeing into international markets by selling an existing product without any adaptations is quite often in practice the first step in becoming a global company. Oftentimes, especially for reduced transportation costs, the desire to look like a local product and to avoid exchange rate fluctuations, companies often set up local offices and manufacturing facilities. This movement can highlight the assumptions and deficiencies of senior management. For example, many Japanese companies started manufacturing facilities in the United States. Many did not realize that elements of the work environment in Japan are unsuitable for the United States. As a result, their expectations of long but unpaid working hours, the harassment of women, and the litigious atmosphere of the U.S. were a recipe for public embarrassment and multi-million-dollar lawsuits. IBM had to develop a research center in New York, hoping to combine the talents of American, Japanese, and German research scientists. After many misunderstandings, the Americans ended up working with Americans, the Japanese with the Japanese, and the Germans with the Germans. The hoped-for synergy never materialized due to cultural conflicts. In addition, many companies attempting to globalize themselves often have senior management that are at the same age, ethnicity, education, and experience. As a result, they often think alike and cannot bring alternative and critical perspective to management decisions. One of my clients had this problem. This investment company was attempting to diversify its holdings and expand into industrial companies. Unfortunately, the board of directors had little experience with industrial operations and was hard-pressed to make operational decisions at their existing investments, and were also at a loss to find how and when to invest in other companies. As part of assisting them in the development of their strategic plan, we recommended they change the composition of their board to include those with an extensive manufacturing background. They did so, and this diversity added considerable insight when the board made its decisions. In addition to defining the strategy canvas and assessing the risks and opportunities that emerging global companies face, companies must also decide what marketing strategies they should pursue. Although it is tempting for a company to compete only on price, using this strategy requires that one not only have efficient operations, but that these become continually more efficient, and that they can take advantage of economies of scale as the company grows. Nonetheless, some emerging companies can compete on price without creating a brand, as Brazil does with iron and Chile does with copper. Other global marketing strategies to consider are building a brand for the long haul, as the Japanese and now Korean car companies have done, advertising the origin of your company, as Colombia has done with its coffees, downplaying your country of origin or emphasizing more generic themes such as sun, beach, and fun, as Mexico's Corona brand has done in the United States and elsewhere. An additional strategy is hiding behind a front country and then using this front country as a transshipment point. Though many companies use this strategy, they keep a tight lid on admitting it. Lastly, companies with sufficient cash flow and management insight can buy into a market, as has AB InBev, the now Brazilian, Belgian, U.S. beer company. In addition to assessing the global environment and the organization's capabilities and opportunities, companies wishing to expand must also evaluate what the future might hold. Though the specifics of the future are indeed hard to predict, companies can at least evaluate long-term trends, evaluate drivers of the future that might affect them, and to develop appropriate strategic plans. The first step is to define your planning horizon, which is often 5 to 15 years in the future. What your horizon might be depends entirely on the organization, but my suggestion is to make it at least long enough for some unexpected events to occur. The second step is to assess what major trends, both macroeconomic and industry-specific, will continue throughout the planning horizon. Macro trends such as increased computational advancement, increased medical advancement with variable availability, and the decline of China's population beginning in 2050 need to be factored into many a company's strategic plans. Industrial trends such as the gobbling up of small companies by their larger competitors, increasing demand and decreasing supply of local engineering talent, and continued corruption by local officials may also be quite relevant dynamics to consider. In addition to determining long-term trends, the drivers of future change may also need to be used in developing a company's strategic plans. I recommend organizations use scenario planning and analysis techniques to look into different possible and probable futures. They can then conduct a strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats analysis and compare the company's capabilities with the opportunities envisioned in each scenario. Using this SWOT analysis as a basis, companies can develop their strategic goals and the plans to implement them. I also want to mention here that there can be a long-term downside to going global. In the long run, an organization must be successful to support the sustainability of its customers and employees. Without this emphasis, companies risk destroying the foundations of what made them successful. Conversely, a company expanding globally faces the same issue. If it perceives a market as only an area to exploit for short-term profit, it begins to undermine the resources, employees, and customers that form the foundation of its wealth. Though initially seen only as a marketing ploy, if they wish to remain successful in the long run, organizations must invest in local infrastructure. This investment includes assisting schools so that future employees become more literate, productive members of the company team, reducing disease and improving health care to drive down absenteeism, and providing group transportation to improve employee arrival times, as well as reducing local pollution.